I'm done. Don't contact me again. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe Mark had sent it to the wrong number. Maybe he meant to text someone else from the office. I read it 3 times, my eyes scanning the words like a detective searching for hidden meaning. But there was none. Just finality, sharp and surgical. I stared at the screen, waiting for another message, some explanation, some thread to pull on. But instead, 3 dots appeared for a brief, trembling second, then disappeared. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't a mistake. It was abandonment. I sat in the kitchen of our suburban home, the one we'd bought together 12 years ago, surrounded by the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the smell of stale coffee. Outside, the sun filtered through the curtains, indifferent. The world kept turning as if my marriage hadn't just been severed by a text message. Mark and I had met in our 20s. I was 26, working long hours managing a small boutique in the city, while he was already climbing the corporate ladder, confident, charming, the kind of man who spoke in plans and promises. I fell in love with his ambition, his sense of certainty. He made me believe that with him, life would always have direction. But direction, I would later learn, can change overnight. We'd been married for 12 years. 12 years of shared dreams, inside jokes, dinner parties, whispered plans for a future that apparently he had already rewritten without me. I remember glancing at the framed photo on the counter our wedding day, my hair pinned in soft curls, his hand resting on my waist, both of us laughing. I wondered when that laughter had started to sound hollow to him. Still holding my phone, I opened the banking app. I don't know why I did it, maybe instinct, maybe dread. And then the real gut punch landed. The joint account, empty. Every dollar we'd saved gone. Years of careful budgeting, every shared plan for vacations, renovations, our future erased with a wire transfer. That was when my hands started to shake. Not out of heartbreak, but out of disbelief at the sheer cowardice of it all. After 12 years, my husband hadn't just left me. He'd looted the life we'd built together and vanished into thin air. I called him. Straight to voicemail. Again and again. The same message: the number you've dialed is unavailable. By noon, his office confirmed what my heart already knew. He'd quit his job the previous week. No notice, no goodbye. That's when the first tear fell. Not for love lost, that grief hadn't hit yet, but for the humiliation. The realization that everyone else might have known before I did. That I'd been played like a fool in a story everyone else had already read the ending to. It wasn't until later that day, when his sister called me, that I learned the full picture. Mark had run off with a 20-year-old receptionist named Melissa, his new soulmate, as he'd apparently described her in a drunken confession. They had fled the country using the savings from our account. I laughed when I heard it. A hollow, bitter laugh that startled even me. It wasn't that I found it funny, it was that it sounded so cliché, so absurd. My husband, the man who lectured me on maturity, responsibility, and acting my age, had thrown away a decade of stability for a girl young enough to call him sir. That night, I sat alone on the floor of our bedroom. The bed looked untouched, the closet half empty. His cologne still lingered in the air, that woodsy scent I'd once loved, now nauseating. My reflection in the mirror looked foreign, calm, composed, almost eerily so. I should have been screaming, breaking things, drowning in tears. But instead, a strange clarity began to settle in. Mark thought he'd destroyed me, but he had no idea what I had already done. See, betrayal doesn't always arrive without warning. It whispers first. For months, there had been signs: the late nights at the office, the sudden gym membership, the change in passwords, the small irritations that had started to replace affection. I had asked gently at first. He had smiled, kissed my forehead, and told me I was overthinking again. But the thing about being underestimated is that it gives you time to prepare. 3 months before that text message, I had quietly started moving things. Small amounts here and there from the joint account to a separate one under my name. I didn't do it out of suspicion at first, I did it out of instinct. I told myself it was for emergencies. I guess I just didn't realize the emergency would be him. I also started documenting, not intentionally but habitually. I had always been meticulous: receipts, email confirmations, copies of every tax filing and bank transaction. My boutique had taught me that control comes from organization. Now that habit was my weapon. Because when I logged in that day and saw the empty account, I already knew something he didn't. The joint account wasn't the only one with money in it. And his little transfer wasn't invisible. Every transaction left a digital fingerprint one I could trace. I closed my laptop that night and took a deep breath. I wasn't going to chase him. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to humiliate myself by demanding explanations from a man who couldn't even face me. I was going to watch him fall slowly, quietly, beautifully. The next morning I went to the bank. The manager, a kind woman named Clara, looked at me with concern as she printed the transaction history. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Harrison," she said gently. "He transferred everything to an offshore account registered under a shell company." I nodded, calm. "Can I have copies of all the transfer details?" She hesitated. "Of course. But may I ask, are you planning legal action?" I smiled faintly. "Not yet." That smile surprised even me. Because beneath the pain, beneath the betrayal, something else had begun to bloom, not rage, not revenge exactly, but something deeper, purpose. That night, I packed a single suitcase. I left the house keys on the counter alongside a note that simply read, "You can have the house, Mark. I'll take everything else." And I meant it. Because while he had been busy plotting his escape, I had been quietly securing my independence. My boutique, the business he had once mocked as a cute hobby, was fully in my name, and in the weeks before he disappeared, it had landed a lucrative contract with a regional fashion retailer. He didn't know it yet, but the company's first payment, a six-figure sum, had hit my account that very morning. He'd emptied our joint savings, yes, but I had just become richer than he'd ever realized. As I stood in the doorway that night, suitcase in hand, I whispered to the empty house, "You didn't end me, Mark. You freed me." And as the echo of my own voice filled the silence, I knew this story wasn't going to end the way he thought. The first morning after I left the house, I woke up in a small apartment above my boutique. The air smelled faintly of lavender from the candle I'd lit the night before, trying to disguise the loneliness. My body felt weightless, almost hollow. I had spent 12 years building a life around another person, and now I had to remember what it meant to exist on my own terms again. People say heartbreak is loud, that it shatters your world like glass. But for me, it was quiet. It moved like fog. It wrapped around me in the mornings when I reached for a second coffee cup that wasn't there, when I cooked too much food for one person, when I caught myself still checking my phone for messages that would never come. In those first few weeks, I didn't tell anyone what had happened, not even my mother. I couldn't stand the pity that would follow the whispered reassurances, the condolences spoken in soft voices. I didn't want sympathy. I wanted power. So I worked. The boutique became my sanctuary. I threw myself into it with an energy I hadn't felt in years. From dawn until midnight, I rearranged displays, styled windows, and met clients. My hands moved constantly, sewing, writing, designing, anything to keep from feeling the emptiness that Mark had left behind. The business began to grow faster than I expected. Word spread about my attention to detail, the way I made every client feel like they mattered. For years, I'd hidden behind my husband's shadow, the polished wife of a successful man. But now I was building something that was entirely mine. At night, though, the silence returned, and in that silence my thoughts turned dark. I replayed everything, every lie, every moment of condescension that I'd excused as stress or ambition. How he'd insisted on managing our finances because numbers bored me. How he'd dismissed my ideas with a smirk, saying, "You're too emotional, Claire." He had mistaken my gentleness for weakness, my silence for ignorance, my loyalty for blindness. I sat at my kitchen table one night, staring at the papers Clara from the bank had printed for me. The transfer details, the offshore routing numbers. A cup of untouched tea cooled beside me. It was all there in black and white, his betrayal written in numbers. That's when the idea began to take shape. I didn't want to destroy him with rage. I wanted to destroy him with precision, with calm. I started by tracing the accounts. I didn't need to hack or pry. Mark had never been subtle. He'd left trails everywhere. Offshore accounts don't hide you completely, they just make you harder to find. But he had used his own name on the business registration of the shell company, probably assuming no one would ever think to look. I spent hours researching online, cross-referencing his company name, MH Consulting, with the new wire transfer details. It led me to a small firm in the Cayman Islands that specialized in tax shelters. I smiled a sharp, humorless smile. Men like Mark always thought they were too clever to get caught. The next morning, I called an old friend Laura who worked as a financial consultant. She had always liked me, though. She'd once called my marriage a cage disguised as a partnership. When I told her what happened, she was silent for a long time. Then she said, "Do you want me to help you get your money back, or do you want to bury him?" "Both," I said simply. She laughed softly. "Good, because I'm better at the second one." Within a week, we had a plan. Laura helped me file a quiet fraud investigation through a private financial recovery service. They specialized in uncovering illicit transfers and tracing funds hidden offshore. It would take time, but that was fine. I had patience. Meanwhile, I began to craft my second plan, one that was more personal. Revenge, yes, but wrapped in elegance. I didn't want to scream. I wanted him to feel my silence the way a man feels the absence of air. Through an acquaintance in his old firm, I learned that Mark's new life wasn't as perfect as he imagined. His colleagues had mocked him behind his back, calling him a cliché, a middle-aged executive who had traded his wife for youth and chaos. He had liquidated everything to impress Melissa, buying her a luxury condo in Thailand and promising a fresh start. But fresh starts built on lies have short expiration dates. By midsummer, I received a call from the recovery service. "We've traced the funds," the investigator said. He transferred them into an account under his new partner's name, Melissa Carter. I almost laughed. He had trusted her enough to put my stolen money in her name. "Can we recover it?" I asked. "Not yet," he said. "But if she spends it, there will be records. That's when we can move." I thanked him and hung up. My fingers drummed against the table. I wasn't angry. I was amused, because I knew exactly what would happen next. Women like Melissa, young, impulsive, intoxicated by luxury, never understood the value of silence. She would spend, flaunt, and post, and in doing so she would destroy him faster than I ever could. Sure enough, 2 weeks later, her Instagram told the story for me. Photos of her draped in designer clothes, sipping champagne by infinity pools, tagging locations with reckless pride. Every post was time-stamped proof, a digital confession of theft. I saved everyone. Then I waited. I knew Mark would contact me eventually. Men like him always do. When the money runs thin, when the honeymoon ends, when the new toy begins to lose its shine, they crawl back suddenly full of regret and revisionist memories. And he did. It was a rainy evening when my phone buzzed. The name that once made my heart leap now made me feel nothing. "Mark, can we talk, please?" I stared at the screen for a long moment before responding. "Me about what?" A few seconds later, "Mark, one made a mistake. I want to come home." I almost laughed. Home. The word rolled bitterly in my mouth. "Me, you sold our home, Mark. Remember, you emptied our account. You made your choice." He replied instantly. "Mark, she's not who I thought she was. She's unstable. I think she's using me." I set the phone down and took a slow breath. The satisfaction wasn't cruel. It was quiet, steady, inevitable. Karma doesn't always need help. Sometimes it just needs patience. I typed one final message. "Me, you'll have to take that up with your accountant since she's the one holding your money now." The typing bubbles appeared, then vanished, then appeared again. "Mark, what does that mean, Claire? What did you do?" I didn't answer. I turned off my phone, exhaled, and smiled. That night, as rain tapped against the window, I poured myself a glass of wine and thought about the strange symmetry of it all. The man who had once lectured me about control had lost everything to his own arrogance. The woman who had once been called too emotional had outweighed them both with cold precision. It wasn't over, not yet. I still had one more card to play. Because Mark didn't know that the boutique, the same silly little business he'd mocked, had just signed a new partnership with a major fashion retailer. And the company he had fled with, MH Consulting, had used my name, my tax filings, and my identity on its registration. That legally made him liable for identity fraud. He had emptied our account, but in doing so he had also signed his own downfall. The next morning I called Laura again. "It's time," I said. "Let's make him wish he never hit send on that message." The next few weeks felt like the slow tightening of a net. Every move I made was measured, deliberate, quiet. I never raised my voice, never announced my intentions. I had learned that silence was the most powerful weapon in a world full of noise. Laura helped me assemble everything. The bank transfers, the offshore documentation, the shell company records, and most importantly, the company registration papers that tied my name to MH Consulting. She stared at the file in disbelief. "He really used your identity for this? That's a federal offense." I knotted my fingers, tracing the edge of the folder. He thought it would make him untouchable, that no one would question a married couple's shared information. He thought I'd be too naive to notice. Laura gave a small, sharp smile. Then let's remind him who he married. We took the evidence to a financial crimes attorney, a sharp woman named Evelyn Chang. She listened quietly as we explained everything. When I showed her the last page, Mark's signature forged beside mine, she sat back and said, "You have him cornered, Mrs. Harrison. And he doesn't even know it yet." The phrase stayed with me. Cornered. I liked the sound of that. I didn't want to ruin him in a single blow. I wanted to dismantle him piece by piece the way he had dismantled me. So Evelyn and I decided to proceed carefully. She filed a formal notice of financial fraud, but under seal, meaning Mark wouldn't be notified right away. That gave us time to prepare. Meanwhile, the private recovery firm continued tracking the stolen funds. As expected, Melissa had been reckless. The moment she started buying high-end jewelry and designer handbags, the bank flagged her account for unusual activity. The irony was exquisite. The very lifestyle Mark had promised her was what triggered the investigation that would bring them both down. By mid-autumn, I received an official letter confirming the legal freeze on both their accounts. I sat at my desk holding that envelope, staring at the seal. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. But I wasn't done. Mark had humiliated me publicly, leaving through text, letting gossip spread through our friends, making me look like the abandoned wife while he played the role of the man who had found love again. I wanted truth to be his undoing, not rumor. So I waited. Then one afternoon, as if handed to me by fate, I received an invitation, a formal one embossed in silver, to a charity gala in the city. It was an event Mark had always loved, full of people who measured success by brand labels and donation tiers. And this year he was on the sponsor list. I looked at that invitation for a long time. Then without hesitation I decided I would go. I wore a simple black gown from my own collection, elegant, understated, the kind that whispered confidence rather than shouted wealth. As I walked into the ballroom that night, heads turned. I hadn't been seen in months. The whispers began immediately. "She looks incredible. I heard he left her for some young thing. Poor woman. She must be heartbroken." I smiled to myself. Let them think what they wanted. I wasn't there for pity. I was there for closure. And then I saw him. Mark stood near the bar, laughing too loudly, a drink in hand. His suit was expensive, but his face, the face I'd once traced with my fingers in the dark, looked older, thinner, worn. Beside him, Melissa shimmered in a sequined dress, all surface and sparkle, clutching his arm like a trophy she didn't yet realize was broken. When his eyes found mine, the color drained from his face. For a moment, he didn't move. Then, forcing a smile, he muttered something to Melissa and started toward me. "Claire," he said when he reached me, his voice trembling between charm and panic. "You look amazing." I took a slow sip of champagne. "You look tired." His jaw tightened. "Can we talk?" "I thought we already did," I said softly. "You texted me, remember? I'm done. Don't contact me again." He flinched as if the words themselves had weight. "Claire, please. I made mistakes. I cut him off gently. "Oh, I know, Mark. I know exactly what you did." His mouth opened, but before he could respond, a man approached the gala organizer, greeting me warmly. "Mrs. Harrison, congratulations on your new contract with 11 Group. Everyone's talking about your designs. You've outshined half the industry tonight." Mark froze. 11 Group. I turned to the organizer, smiling. "Yes, it's been an exciting partnership. We're expanding internationally next year." When I looked back at Mark, I saw at the flicker of realization, the dawning horror. He understood now that I hadn't crumbled. I had flourished. The organizer moved on, leaving us alone again. Mark's voice dropped. "You knew, didn't you, about the money? About everything?" I tilted my head. "Of course I did." "What did you do?" he hissed. I leaned in, my voice barely above a whisper. "Nothing yet. But I'd start checking your emails." His eyes widened, panic flashing across his face. "What do you mean?" I smiled. "You'll find out soon enough." Then I turned and walked away, leaving him standing there amidst the laughter and clinking glasses, a man surrounded by everything he valued and yet utterly alone. 2 days later, the legal notices arrived. Evelyn had filed the charges, and the Department of Financial Regulation had launched an official investigation. The fraud, the forgery, the offshore transfers, all of it was now a matter of record. And because his company had used my name in its registration, I had every right to publicly clear my identity. Which meant the real story, broke through every business blog and social feed within 48 hours. Corporate executive under investigation for financial misconduct involving spouse's identity. Former CFO accused of misusing wife's personal data for offshore transfers. The headlines were merciless. I didn't need to say a word. The world said it for me. Clients distanced themselves. Former colleagues unfollowed him. The company that had once courted his leadership released a statement expressing their deep disappointment. Melissa deleted her Instagram in panic after people began connecting her name to the stolen funds. And me, I simply went to work. I remember sitting in my office one morning watching the sunlight spill across my desk and realizing that justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, one signature, one headline, one quiet undoing at a time. By the end of the month, Mark's assets were frozen, his passport confiscated, and his career effectively over. Evelyn called me with the final update. He's under federal review. He'll be lucky if he avoids prison. I didn't ask for more. I didn't need to. That night I went home, drew a bath, and for the first time in nearly a year, I cried not out of grief, but out of release. The tears came quietly sliding down my cheeks as I thought of everything I had endured. Betrayal, humiliation, loneliness, but also strength, resilience, transformation. I realized then that revenge had never really been about him. It had always been about reclaiming myself, the woman I had lost long before he left. I climbed into bed, my heart lighter, my breathing steady. I whispered to the darkness, "You can't destroy someone who has already rebuilt herself." And as sleep pulled me under, I knew that this wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of the life he never thought I could live without him. The world is strange after revenge. You think it will taste sweet like honey, but in truth it's bittersweet, complex like dark chocolate melting on your tongue. There's satisfaction, yes, but there's also grief. A grief for who you were before the pain, before you learned how cruel the people you loved could be. In the weeks that followed the scandal, my days felt lighter, but my nights heavier. I'd wake at 2 a.m., sometimes heart-pounding, thinking I heard Mark's voice calling my name, only to realize it was just the hum of the refrigerator or the wind brushing against the windows. I'd spent so long fighting to win that I hadn't yet stopped to mourn what I'd lost. There was a version of me who would have forgiven him if he had just said sorry. That woman had loved him deeply, stupidly, completely. She had waited for him to come home from business trips, sent him good luck texts before meetings, believed every lie he told about working late. That woman deserved to be remembered too, not mocked for her trust. I started therapy, not because I was broken, but because I didn't want to carry his poison any longer. My therapist, a gentle older woman named Grace, told me something I'll never forget. Closure isn't a door someone else closes for you. It's the door you learn to close yourself. I smiled when she said that, because deep down I already knew it was true. One afternoon, while reviewing new designs for my upcoming collection, my phone buzzed again. The name on the screen froze me. Mark. It had been months since the gala, since the investigation. I considered ignoring it, but something inside me said, "No, face him." I answered. "Claire," he breathed, his voice hollow, strained. "Please, don't hang up." I said nothing. I don't even know where to start," he continued. "I've lost everything. The house, the money, my job. Melissa. She left me. She took what was left and disappeared. I'm living in a rented room. I'm broken, Claire." A long silence stretched between us. His voice sounded smaller now, stripped of arrogance, stripped of certainty. For a moment I almost felt sorry for him, the way you might feel sorry for a wounded animal that once bit you. Then I remembered the text message, the empty account, the years of control disguised as care. "Why are you calling me, Mark?" I asked finally. My tone was calm, almost gentle. "I don't know," he whispered. "Maybe because you're the only person who ever really knew me. Because I can't sleep at night. Because I need to know you're okay." I closed my eyes. The absurdity of it all nearly made me laugh. "You need to know I'm okay, after everything you did." "I was wrong," he said. His voice cracked. "You have no idea how much I regret." I stopped him. "No, Mark. Don't use regret like a bandage. It doesn't heal the wound, it just hides it." He said nothing. I could hear him breathing ragged on the other end. Do you remember what you told me the day you convinced me to let you handle the finances? I asked softly. You said, "You don't need to worry about the details, Claire. I'll take care of you." Yes, he murmured. Well, I said you were right about one thing. You did take care of me, just not the way you intended. He exhaled shakily. I deserve that. I looked out the window. The city skyline glowed gold in the afternoon sun, the kind of beauty that doesn't need anyone's approval to exist. You deserve to face what you created, I said. And I deserve peace. So let's both take what we've earned. He tried to speak again, but I hung up. This time it didn't feel cruel. It felt final. That night I sat in my apartment with a glass of wine and the quiet hum of life all around me. The traffic below, a couple laughing across the street, the soft purr of my cat curled at my feet. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even triumphant. I was free. Freedom, I realized, isn't loud. It's the quiet you no longer have to explain. A few days later, I got a letter from the court. The investigation was officially closed. The judge's note was short and clinical. Mr. Harrison's case has been resolved. Assets recovered, charges settled. I folded the letter neatly and placed it in a drawer alongside a copy of the original text that started it all. I kept it not out of bitterness, but as a reminder of how endings can be beginnings in disguise. Business flourished in the months that followed. The boutique grew from a small shop into a brand. My designs began appearing in magazines, my name whispered in rooms I'd once thought were closed to me. But I didn't do it to prove him wrong anymore. I did it because I loved it, because it made me feel alive. Every stitch, every color, every new creation felt like a reclamation of the pieces of myself I'd lost. I wasn't the same woman who had been broken by a text message. I was someone reborn from its ashes. Sometimes clients would ask about the meaning behind my latest line-flowing dresses in shades of silver and crimson. I'd smile and tell them it's about transformation, about how destruction and creation are sometimes the same thing. They never knew how literal that was. Months passed. Then one morning, as I walked through the boutique before arranging a display of scarves, I felt something warm and unexpected gratitude. Gratitude for the pain that had forced me to rebuild, for the silence that had taught me strength, for the betrayal that had introduced me to myself. And in that moment, I realized I didn't hate Mark anymore. I didn't even resent him. I had outgrown the version of myself who needed revenge to feel powerful. I whispered to the empty room, "You taught me exactly what I needed to learn." That evening, I drove out to the old house. It had been sold months ago, repainted, remodeled, unrecognizable. I parked across the street and watched as a young couple carried boxes inside, laughing, holding hands. For a fleeting second, I saw a reflection of who Mark and I had once been, before ambition rotted into greed, before love turned into control. I didn't envy them. I just hoped they'd take better care of each other than we had. As I drove away, the sunset lit up the horizon in shades of orange and gold. My phone buzzed with a message from Laura: "Dinner tonight, we need to celebrate." Too. I smiled and texted back always. Life, I thought, doesn't give us happy endings. It gives us honest ones. And mine was finally honest. I used to think revenge would heal me, that watching Mark fall would somehow fix everything he broke inside me. But standing here now, nearly a year later, I finally understand revenge doesn't heal. It just clears the rubble so you can start building again. The real healing came in the quiet moments, the ones nobody saw. Like the first morning I woke up and didn't think of him at all, or the afternoon I caught myself humming while sketching a new design, or the night I laughed, genuinely laughed over dinner with friends and realized the sound didn't feel forced anymore. Those moments, small and ordinary, were the ones that rebuilt me piece by piece. My therapist once asked me, "Claire, if you could go back, would you change anything?" I thought about it for a long time. The betrayal, the loss, the humiliation, all of it. Then I shook my head. "No," I said, "because I wouldn't be this version of me without all that pain." And that's the truth. Pain is the strangest kind of sculptor. It carves away everything false until only your truest self remains. One weekend, I decided to take a trip. Alone. No itinerary, no expectations. I drove to the coast where Mark and I had once spent our honeymoon. The same beach, the same crashing waves, but everything looked different now. Maybe it wasn't the place that had changed. Maybe it was me. I walked barefoot along the shore, the wind pulling at my hair, the sun soft on my skin. I remembered how he used to stand beside me there talking about forever, and how I had believed him completely. Now, as the waves lapped at my feet, I whispered to the wind, "Forever doesn't exist, but peace does." And somehow that felt better than any promise he ever made. That night, I stayed at a small seaside inn. The owner, an older woman with kind eyes, asked if I was celebrating something. I smiled and said yes, my freedom. She laughed softly. "That's a good thing to celebrate, dear." Later, lying in bed with the sound of the ocean outside, I realized that freedom isn't the absence of pain, it's the courage to live fully after pain. It's the choice to wake up, to keep moving forward, even when your heart still remembers the weight of the past. When I got back home, life carried on as it always does. The boutique kept growing. I hired new staff, expanded to a second location, and started mentoring young designers. Sometimes they'd ask me how I built such a successful brand. I'd smile and tell them, by starting from nothing twice. Because that's what I'd done. I'd built a life with a man who destroyed it, and then I built another one from the ashes, stronger, wiser, completely my own. A few months later, I received a letter from the court. Mark's case was officially closed. He'd accepted a settlement that left him with almost nothing. There would be no prison time, but there would also be no comeback. He had been blacklisted in his industry, his reputation permanently scarred. I read the letter in silence, then placed it in a drawer beside the others. The text message, the bank records, the fraud papers. They didn't feel like weapons anymore. They felt like artifacts from another life, another version of me that had finally found rest. I lit a candle by the window that evening and stood watching the city lights flicker like distant stars. My reflection in the glass looked softer now, older perhaps, but stronger. The kind of strength that doesn't shout, the kind that simply endures. I whispered, not to him this time, but to myself, "You did it. You made it out." And for the first time in years, I meant it. I still get asked sometimes by friends, by strangers online, what I would say to someone who's been betrayed like I was. My answer is always the same. I'd tell them, you don't have to get even. You just have to get up. You don't have to destroy them. You just have to stop letting them destroy you. And you don't have to prove your worth to anyone who treated you like you were disposable, because the moment you start rebuilding, the proof will speak for itself. That's what life taught me. Karma is patient, but so is recovery. And sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply becoming the person they can never touch again. I walked through my boutique one last time before closing that night. The mannequins stood like silent witnesses to my transformation, dressed in my newest collection, Phoenix. Every piece in it carried the same motif: rebirth through fire. One design in particular caught my eye, a red silk gown embroidered with subtle gold flames along the hem. I had made it months ago, late one night when I couldn't sleep. At the time, I hadn't realized what it symbolized. Now I did. It wasn't about revenge, it was about resurrection. I ran my fingers over the fabric and smiled. "You're stronger than you think," I whispered to myself. Outside, the city glowed. People rushed past, chasing lives, dreams, mistakes. Somewhere out there, Mark was probably one of them, just another man trying to outrun the ghost of his own decisions. I didn't wish him harm anymore. I just wished him understanding, because that was the one thing he never had. As I locked the door and stepped into the night, the cool air kissed my skin. I looked up at the stars and felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time: hope. Not the fragile kind that depends on someone else, but the steady kind that lives quietly inside you. I realized then that I didn't need closure from him. I had written my own. And maybe that's what this whole story has been about. Not revenge, not justice, not even forgiveness, but reclaiming my voice, the one he silenced, the one I let stay quiet for far too long. So if you're listening to this and you've ever been broken, betrayed, or abandoned, if someone took your trust and used it against you, I want you to remember something. You are not their mistake. You are your own miracle. You can rebuild. You can rise. You can start over at any age and any place after any heartbreak. Because life doesn't end when someone leaves you. Sometimes that's exactly when it begins. And if my story meant something to you, if it reminded you that pain can be the beginning of power, then please share it. Maybe someone else out there needs to hear it tonight. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true stories of heartbreak, strength, and transformation. And if you've ever risen from your own ashes, tell me your story in the comments below. Because somewhere out there, someone needs your story the way you once needed mine. Thank you for listening.